It is much easier for a lioness to concentrate attention and hand game than for a human to maintain the state of concentration needed to form an orderly thought. Moreover, as the potential of the interpolar space increases with age by expanding the range of words, concepts, thoughts, and feelings, so the difficulty in controlling this primordial psychosis also increases. Let's note that in the childhood, especially in the early and the earliest childhood, we have no problem with the psychosis. The less material there is in the interpolar space, the easier it is to organize the primary human psychosis. This is also confirmed by the sociological observation clearly showing that in the societies with a low level of education or in the professional groups with a predominant physical profile of work, the frequency of the observable and therefore destabilized psychosis is lower than in the societies with a high level of education or in the professional groups of the so-called intellectuals. The same is true throughout the history. Since the universal enlightenment, there has been a steady increase in the number of the psychotic decompensations compared to the pre-enlightenment time. And the modern time, especially in the northern hemisphere, is a theater of a real psychotic hecatomb. As much, unfortunately, perhaps we have so far minimized this problem, considering the psychotic decompensation as typical only for the so-called schizophrenic psychosis with characteristic total chaos of thoughts, words, and feelings, instead of the obsolete term schizophrenic, we should use the term chaotic psychosis. Meanwhile, other types of the psychotic decompensation are equally or perhaps even more widespread. Some of them are extremely dangerous to the environment, such as the psychotic decompensation of the seemingly orderly type, that's the so-called paranoia. In this case, as in any psychosis, we are dealing with the complete independence of the third element, that is interpolar space, words, thoughts, and feelings, from both the internal factors, anxiety and emotional poles, and external factors, environment, with a simultaneous preservation of the ability to organize the material of the interpolar space. Moreover, this order is much more meticulous and precise than in the case of the psyche, with the preserved influence of the psychic poles and of the environment. Orderly psychotic decompensation, so far called paranoid psychosis, is a great solution from the point of view of the psyche economy. It's a great idea to simply become independent of all these internal and external influences while maintaining the ability to organize the third element, especially given the inability to cope with anxiety and the emotions as well as with the environment. This procedure is beneficial because it's much easier to organize the material of the third element when it's immobile. And this is what's like when the dynamizing influence of the poles of the psyche and of the environment is removed. I believe that the vast majority of the people must cope with this process. The culture of individualism favors the spread of the ordered psychotic decompensation. And who knows, maybe it's not the cause, but the effect of the spread of this form of functioning of the human psyche. In any case, the modern history, especially the post-Enlightenment history, is a history written by the psychotic decompensation of an ordered type. It's a psychological formula that prevails all over forms of mental functioning. In other words, most of us present more or less consistent forms of this disorder, and at the top of all social, professional, and political hierarchies are those of us for whom this decompensation has taken the most decisive and radical form of disconnection from all internal and external influences. And since we are led by the people who are cut off from their reality and from their own emotions and anxiety, then it's not difficult to find the terrible fruits of this state of affairs. The wars of the 20th and 21st centuries didn't break out by themselves. There were only a handful of people behind each of them, and the democratic system, unfortunately, promotes those of us who in the most perfect way can cut themselves off from internal and external reality and so can seize the political power. The recipe for the annihilation of the humanity is now being realized because there is nothing more dangerous than these two concepts together: democracy and mutual fierce competition between people who are psychotically decompensated in an orderly manner, paranoid. Basically, there are three psychic strategies in the attitude of the modern mankind. The first, more and more common, is the aforementioned ordered psychotic decompensation strategy. The second is the disordered psychotic decompensation strategy. This form is treated in the psychiatric hospitals. Contrary to the first, which is not only considered inappropriate or disturbed by the general public, but seems to be even promoted. The occupation of the highest ranks in the social, professional, and political hierarchy almost exclusively by the persons showing the first type of decompensation is the proof of its sociological success. Thanks to the blind democratic mechanism, people with the most dramatic psychotic decompensation of the ordered type, instead of being eliminated from the social circulation, on the contrary, they are lifted to its very top. No wonder then that with such benefits, this decompensation will become even more common now and in the future, as it's best suited to the present social conditions. And finally, the third type of the human psychic strategy, as old as the humanity itself, even older than the first type. It's a natural strategy, the most difficult, often too difficult in the long run, and therefore often turning into the first or the second type strategy. This is a strategy with which we enter into life at the very beginning. It consists in the free coexistence of the three elements of the psyche and the lack of any barrier in either direction between each of the elements. Thus, the anxiety and the emotional poles freely penetrate the interpolar space with their energy, and the external environment also maintains an undisturbed symbolic exchange with it. At this point, it should be noted that it seems appropriate to call the environment the fourth element of the human psyche without exaggeration. As I have shown in my earlier works, it's a psychic element of the paramount importance for the balanced functioning of the human psyche. Moreover, it's an element without which a natural psychic strategy would be impossible. The symbolic exchange with the environment, that's the act of communication, has been the only source of enriching the potential of the third element since the very beginning of its existence. Of course, in the case of a toxic communication, it will also be a source of the damage and of the dysfunction of the third element. Natural psychic strategy, unlike the other two which are stagnant, is a developmental strategy. Therefore, it's the only one that we should induce in children and adolescents. That's in the period of acquiring new and expanding already existing mental competences. Interestingly, we expect more from the children than from the adults, because in the case of the latter, it's often too late to exit from closed, stagnant strategies, such as the first two mental strategies, structured and disordered decompensation strategies. Of course, that's just a theory. In practice, older and older parents, clinging to the closed, orderly strategy, will unknowingly induce such a strategy or even force it on their adolescent offspring. This phenomenon is only gaining in importance as the period of childbearing progresses towards old age. The reconstruction of the process of the psyche evolution since the appearance of the anxiety to the development of the present human consciousness finds its echo also in the individual development of the psyche.